What's up, everybody? We are live and we have us a very, very, very special guest. Tonight with us, the author of Honey Island Swamp Monster and granddaughter of the legendary Harlan Ford, Mrs. Dana Holyfield. How you doing, Mrs. Holyfield?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing great. So we got about an hour, so we're going to jump right into it. Of course, if everybody knows, if you're from the South, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, hopefully, you've heard of two creatures that are pretty famous around here. One is the Boggy Creek creature. Two is the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and that dates back to the 60s, just like the Boggy Creek creature. So, Mrs. Holyfield, if you want to give us a little info on how your grandfather came across the Boggy Creek creature and what happened from then, we'd love to hear about that.
Well, it was the Honey Island Swamp Monster. He was it was in Louisiana, and they had a area of the Honey Island Swamp where they were looking for a campsite, and they had built a camp out there, and they were trekking through, carrying supplies, and they were in a clearing that they had made going back and forth to the camp, and they come upon this thing that was on all fours. It had its back to them, and it was looked like it was doing something, like rutting around, and they were like, what is that? When it heard their voices, it stood up and faced them, and stood like taller than my grandfather. He was 6'4", and he said this thing was probably like 7 foot from what he could tell, and it looked right at him. Stood there for a minute, and they didn't know what it was going to do, so they went to grab their guns because they didn't know if it was going to attack them or anything, but it ran from them. And then that was in 1963, the first encounter. And then in 74 was when he came across the tracks in the same area that he saw the creature, and he poured the plaster Paris tracks, and that's sort of when the legend got started, where he called in some zoologists and the wildlife and fisheries to see if they had seen anything like that. And so then word got out, that he had, about his encounter. So then other locals came forth and, claimed they had seen something out there also that was very similar.
Wow, that's if any of y'all follow this I've followed this story since I was about 10-11 years old, and I'm fixing to be 42. And is over the years you just seen all these three-toed prints, and it's really amazing that this creature that your grandfather came across had three toes, because if you research the Boggy Creek creature, it also had three toes. And I kind of found that interesting. I was talking with my partner about that earlier today, and it's amazing. And then Arkansas and Louisiana are right there, so
Right.
it's just amazing. One thing I noticed looking at the pictures over the years, and at the footprints, and I've seen different sizes, different casts. Some looks like it had the shorter toes, and then there were some that looked like it had the longer toes. Did your grandfather ever suspect there was more than one?
Oh yeah, he had found 5 different sets of sizes of prints, and that's why he always said there was more than one. It was like a like he said, all God's creatures, you know, recreate, they mate and have babies, and so
Right.
he just always assumed it had more than one out there, because he did find several different sizes, small ones, and then the larger. But it wasn't all at the same time. I mean, as he kept investigating, and it was different times of the year, but he did find many different sizes.
Right. So I looked at a map last night, and one of the things I found interesting about Honey Island and around that way is along the Pearl River and along the Mississippi River, there is just so many wildlife management areas. And if you look at it and you track it all the way up north, it's just nothing but desolate woods on either side. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so much area for these creatures to hide in. And
Yeah, they could roam from what, like
oh
some people
yeah,
think they migrate from like maybe different, all the way from Florida, all the way, north, all the way to probably Arkansas. So
right,
maybe it's the same type of creatures that are in all those areas because the three-toed tracks and the ones that we found, and I'm sure that theirs are like webbed almost, so they adapt to the swamp and
mhm,
being able to swim and everything that they would have to do out here, but they could go from one location to the other.
right. There's and if you read up on it, y'all, there's and probably Mrs. Holyfield can probably let us in on this. I know there's a lot of legend that says back in the 20s that a some sort of a circus train car or something of the sort crashed, and
Mhm.
no telling what was on there. They said chimpanzees, monkeys, or whatever may have gotten out. Was there any legitimacy to that?
Well, from what I've heard that story, and I know in other areas they always say there's always a train crash in the woods or the swamp, but they're actually, like, from the old timers that were in that area told me there was a real train accident at that time, a circus train. So maybe that's, I wouldn't say it wasn't true because I mean, I really wasn't there back then, but there was a lot of old timers that claim it did happen, and that there was like monkeys that they found. They had to go round them all up. Maybe some of them they didn't catch. So
Right. So the I know listening to all these podcasts, there's some video on the Honey Island Swamp Monster on YouTube, and of course, I've watched almost every one of them.
mhm.
There was a gentleman, and I can't remember his name, but he was trying to give some discrepancy about the footage your grandfather actually shot with the camera, and saying that, oh, well, Mr. Ford said it was shot in 1963. Then it turns out it was, I believe he said 1974. That footage, do you know exactly what year that footage was shot in?
Um, it had to have been in the 70s, or before. Well, he died in 1980, so it had to be before that. But we didn't really know about it until way after he died, when I was making my documentary film, and my grandmother had the film, and she had come across a lot of these old films he had in a box of wildlife. He shot a lot of footage of wildlife, whether some of them were labeled turkey or deer or alligator, and there was the one that was labeled Honey Island Swamp Monster. And she's like, I don't know what's on here, but you're welcome to use it. And she happened to have that old projector, and we set it up in the kitchen and, played it on the wall just to see. And we're quite surprised by what we saw on it. But it would have probably had to been in the 70s, I would think. And I think because after his encounter, he started taking that camera, and his encounter was in 63. So it could have been, but you know, in the 60s too, but I would say the 70s.
Okay.
I
And,
think because if I can remember right, somebody that analyzed the type of film said that type of film, or something about the film when they analyzed it, said they thought it was done in the 70s. But I'm
right.
not really for sure.
And there was also another analyst saying, I think that type of film didn't come out until 65 or 67, if I'm not mistaken. I could be, but they were trying to give a whole lot of riffraff about
Yeah.
how
But
the
we've had a
encounter.
lot of
Yeah,
skeptics, like the man who claimed that he had my grandfather's shoe that he found in the swamp with the
right,
shoe, with the thing glued on the back of it and at the bottom. And I went to see him and see the shoe myself, and he was like, "That's your grandfather's shoes." And I'm like, "How do you know? That's been like 40, 50 years ago. How do you know what kind of
right.
shoes he wore?" And but that anyone could take an existing track and glue it to the bottom of a shoe. And my
Oh, absolutely.
grandfather had given out copies of the track when, like different film companies came, like Eagle Films had come down here from Europe, and they were going to make a movie about it at his encounter, and they
Oh, wow.
interviewed him. So he gave them, and he even talks about that in a letter that I found that he had wrote to the Argosy magazine. I printed that in my book so everybody could read the letter just like he wrote it. It was not edited or anything. He mentions that he, gave them a track. He probably, and I'm sure when In Search Of, when he did the TV show with Leonard Nimoy, that show that kind of got this legend started, known worldwide, was they probably asked for a track to go do reenactments or just to have it. But so anyone could take a track and say, oh, this is not real. Look
Right.
at it. And those people that claim this, their last name's Holyfield also, but it's not, they spell theirs with an I. His name's Ricky Holyfield. Him and my grandfather, it was like that whole area back there was like their prime hunting territory. And he didn't want a lot of, his son told me this, like, after we learned about this, I met his son one day, and he said, yeah, he had even told me he had an encounter, the son, but he said, with my dad, we didn't want all these people in our hunting territory. And so they were trying to, call it a hoax and keep the, because they didn't want people from out of town going in there and stirring up things. But,
Right.
and then my grandfather also said that, and my grandmother told me this, that whenever the first time when he first reported this, and that's when the newspaper came and took his picture with all the tracks, and he said it was like monster mania around here. People came from everywhere wanting to go shoot this thing. And my grandfather was afraid people were going to either shoot each other by accident. People go in the swamp, you get turned around and spooked, and you see something move, you might just shoot. So he just decided, I guess later on, he kind of just, we figured that's why he didn't, when he had the film, when he actually did film something, he didn't come out and tell anybody about it, because he knew after the first time when people went crazy, he's like, he didn't want all these people coming back and going in there and trying to shoot at anything that moved. And I think he became, more interested in trying to learn more about it. And, so.
Yeah. And that's real interesting how he tried to keep everybody out of there. It was the same way as what happened when the Boggy Creek creature was discovered. Of course, the Fords from Arkansas actually had their encounter. They got out, and then it just blew up. And then
That's funny you mentioned that about the Ford.
yeah,
Someone just told me, a friend of mine said, did you know their last name was Ford too? And I'm like, no, I really never knew that until
yeah,
I'd seen the movie, before. But so I thought that was interesting. I don't think we're related to them, but that was
yeah.
interesting that they were Fords, and it's the same type of creature that, have to look more
Yep,
into that and find
right.
out.
Right, have to go on to what is that thing called? Where you get your DNA and yeah,
Yeah.
and just have to send it in, see what happens. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I never knew that. That was
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah, they had the same thing happen over there, and of course, it blew up. That that creature actually was shot at a few times. It disappeared for 8 or 9 years, and it came back. It blew up again.
It probably
Um,
migrated down here and then it went back.
and that crossed my mind when
Okay, it
yeah,
left.
it crossed my mind because these things can migrate. They do migrate, and
Mhm.
they can migrate long ways. They thought it may have gone back deep into the swamp. It could have migrated down to your area, and that's what it could have been, because the tracks are pretty similar. I
Mhm.
wouldn't say they're exact, but they were three-toed.
Mhm.
And when that incident happened up there, that was first few in the 60s, and then it came back around the 70s.
Mhm.
So it be coincidental, could be not, but I know these things do migrate, and so it's a possibility it could have been the same creature or one of the same clan.
Yeah.
So when your grandfather shot this film, we know that it was in his hunting area, and from what I've read and heard, that it was a place where you could only get to by boat.
Correct.
He shot
Yes.
this from a tree stand, right?
Yeah, he had a tree blind that he would get up there, and I remember, and I was probably 10 or so. He took a goat and he was going to tie the goat up by that, while he sat up in the tree line, he was going to use the goat as bait. And we were, as children, we played with the goat. Someone had brought him the goat over to use for bait, and we were horrified, thinking, "Oh, the swamp monster is going to eat the goat." And so, and I can remember just like it was yesterday, him leading that goat off, and then he came back though with it at the end of the whatever he was doing out there, and he said it must have either the thing's smarter than he was, and or he just maybe didn't like. He said maybe he's a vegetarian, but
Right.
but yeah, he would get up in that tree blind and uh, wait, I guess, and camouflaged himself up in the tree blind with a lot of foliage in front of him, and that's where he had. This thing was probably a couple hundred yards from just crossing, walking through it, that he happened to capture it.
Oh wow, that means that creature was really huge. Because in the video, if you actually watch it, it looks like it's pretty significant size already. And at 100 yards or more, that's a pretty big creature. 7 foot or better, probably.
Yeah.
Did he ever give any like a really good definable description of what the creature looked like? I know he said he remembers the amber colored eyes, but
Yeah,
did he
that
give?
was the thing he said startled him the most, was the eyes, because they looked right at him. And he said it was like, definitely like it was part animal, but yet it was also looked too human to shoot. Like he said he
Right.
wasn't going to shoot it unless it actually would come and try to hurt him. But he said when it looked at him, it was just the eyes startled him. But he said that it had long long hair that almost touched the ground in the front around the face, and short dingy hair on the body. It was kind of a grayish muddy looking color, and the face, he said, was kind of, didn't have hair on the face area, but he said it was menacing looking, and he said it scared the hell out of me. So it was something that I remember my grandmother and my uncle saying that he used to go, when he would go out to the camp, him and his hunting buddy Billy Mills or whoever he would bring out there, they would always leave the camp unlocked. But after that, he would tie it shut, tied the door shut. He never slept in there again without locking up at night. But
Right.
it didn't keep him out of the swamp. He just became very interested. And it wasn't the only time he saw this thing. It was another time he was taking some men in a boat up. It was like a lot of people from his work. He used to be an air traffic controller, and
Mhm.
and he, they had this big thing where they took all these people on a sandbar and they were going to go fishing, and he was taking a couple of them at a time up the river, and they had to go through this area that's real snaggy with a lot of logs. So he was trying to keep watch on that. He had the headlight on his the headlamp on his forehead.
Mhm.
And he said whenever he went like that with the light, he could see something standing on a bluff watching him in that area, because that's pretty much where he first had the sighting. So when he got back to the campsite with the next group of guys that he dropped off, he told them what he had seen. And then one of the guys was like, "I'm going in there. I'm going to get that. I'm going to shoot that booger for you." It was this guy, Jim Hartzog. So he went back with his gun, and they had waited a little while, and all of a sudden they heard a gunshot go off a few times, and they said the guy, he didn't come back. So they got worried. They thought he was just joking around. So they went in their boat to see if they could find him, and they found him. He had backed off the bluff, and he was hanging on some branches. He was in shock. They pulled him in the boat, and when they got him back to the sandbar, he was like, he finally told them, he said, "I saw it." He said, "I tried to shoot at it." He said, "But he saw the eyes move, and then it went. He said, but I was afraid if I didn't hit it, and he said, I just decided to jump off, and he just went off the bluff. And, so I guess he became a believer after that.
Right. Yeah,
He was
most
joking
definitely.
around. He never was like, I don't believe, I'm going to go get that thing. And so he said, I saw this thing. And
yeah, there's a lot of people that'll hear about an encounter. Well, I'm gonna walk in the woods and go get it. And when they have that encounter, you know what? That discourages a lot of people from going into the woods again. I hear it all the time, and it's just you don't want to go looking for these things. Trust me. If you have property and you investigate it, you run across one, fine. But don't go looking for these things, man. If you're just gonna trample in the woods, you're gonna do more harm than good. Trust me. We got a question from a person named Rusty Rivers, and he's asking if you have any plans for creating an overnight rental situation and or swamp monster tour.
Yeah, I had talked about that on a couple other shows. That is one of my plans that for the future is we have some property out in the swamp that's kind of remote that you have to only get there by boat. And I thought about like having it'll be private tours, like, a couple of people that would be willing to go overnight and take them on a night tour, and then have the campsite set up, take them back, have a little fish fry, whatever, and feed them. And then, they'd stay overnight, and then hopefully like go if they want to. This is like an island out there. The water will have to be low enough because during the months where it rains a lot and we have the flood waters, we wouldn't be able to do it unless you want to stay in the boat the whole time. But is if they want to explore on like the island and look for tracks and evidence, I thought it would be interesting. Then I thought also doing like this type of thing with a podcast type thing where I take guests down this cruise at night. And we do the interview in the boat, talking about the Honey Island Swamp Monster and looking for evidence out there during the interview. So that's two different things I'm thinking about. And then having an overnight. We have a camp out there that's actually, it's my dad's camp on a different, actually on the same island, but way, closer to the main river. It actually is on the main river, but the other place is way up in the swamp, like up a slough. And and that's just something I'm working on with some people that I would have do, with the boat, drive the boats and stuff. But
is your husband going to supply the Snickers?
We're not married no more.
Y'all are not? Oh,
no,
man.
I know. I remember him doing that interview and said, I'll bring you out there, drop you off and leave
some Snickers. Yeah.
And I'll come back in the morning and see how skeptical you are. Yeah, he did. He did that on, I think it was a Fox, which when did that thing for Fox.
Yeah. I watched that. I watched that day before yesterday.
Yeah, he might do some swamp tours after, later on. But no, we're not married no more.
Oh, sad to hear that. I got another question. Steve Riley, and this is one of my administrators on my channel. He wanted to know if the government ever tried to keep your grandfather quiet or tell him not to actually talk about it.
Well, I wouldn't know, but it is a possibility because I remember some other eyewitnesses, another lady that had claimed that she shot something out there, a small one, and men in white coats come and took it. And she thought it was a monkey she shot out of a tree, but when they got up close to it, she said it didn't look like, a monkey. It looked more like what this thing would have been. And they made some calls for like the wildlife and fisheries and all. They had some friends that were in the wildlife and fisheries, and they called someone, and then the white coats come and took it, and they never heard nothing else about it. But the test sites on the government has the NASA has a test site on the other side of the swamp on the back side. It's like the buffer zone where they're testing rockets, and who knows what kind of experiments they do over there. Maybe they created something that got out. I mean, who knows what they do with, they could do all kinds of things in labs, as we know. But so maybe it something that was over there, and the government might have contacted him, and maybe he that could have been one of the reasons too, that he just decided to let it, kind of quiet down.
Right. Me and my partner actually looked at that area yesterday, and we ran across that facility, and it has a person's name, and it's some sort of like space center. And if you look on it on Google Earth and you zoom in, of course, it gives you names of the buildings, and it has an actual laboratory on it. And when we seen that, we're like, well, what do you think's going on there? Of course, way out near the swamp, off the grid, and there's a laboratory. Who knows what's going on down there? So yeah, there's no telling. And actually, this is my partner right here with the next question. He goes, "Did you ever try putting trail cameras out?" And that's Scott Pace from Louisiana. He's my partner.
Hold on. Shut that door, please. Hold on one second. My son's. Right. I don't know. I got you. Look over there. Shut that door. Sorry. I have to have one of those red light studio, like I'm in a studio. Radio show in progress. Don't enter.
Right.
One day. No, but what was I saying? I'm sorry.
Scott Pace had a question. Did you ever try putting trail cameras out?
Yes, we did actually. When we did we were filming with Swamp People one time that's way back when, and they asked us to go out and do a camping overnight looking for, possibly have an encounter. And we did put trail cams up that night, and we did have something happen while we were out there where something was throwing a stick. And then we went sort of at the last minute. We took the camera. They didn't know where we were going. We had someone we knew drop us off, and we were trekking in. It was almost dark, so we had to make camp fast. And as we're making camp, something threw a stick towards us, like sailing. At first I thought it was like squirrels knocking something out of the tree, and waited a little while, and then heard some knocking noises, like something was knocking on a tree. And then the trail cams were up high in the tree. He had put them up pretty high. And then during the night, after everybody kind of settled down and got in their tents, I could hear something walking like on 2 feet around the camp. And there was no way I was going to sleep. And I was trying to wake them up. It's like something's out there. So finally they get up and go look, and then they go in. And the camera guys, after they went in the tent, they didn't come out no more after that. I think they were like used to shooting alligators, filming alligators on the main river. I don't think that they were from New York or somewhere. I don't think they'd ever been in the swamp that deep, where we took them.
Wow.
And so I think they kind of got uneasy too, so it's like, but I could hear something walking. It didn't sound like a hog rutting around. But anyway, the next day, early when the sun came up, we took out of there and took those cameras. And when we got back to the camp, looked at what was on the film, and there was something that was, you could see like little pieces of hair sticking up that was in the corner of the lens, as if something had leaned over, look to see what the camera was. But so that was the only time we've really captured something like that on film. But I told my son not so long ago, so we need to go put some cameras up on that island. We're thinking about doing this overnight thing, just to see what would, at night, what would come out.
Right. When y'all have gone out in the past, have y'all ever tried maybe doing tree knocks, maybe any type of howls? I know a lot of times when I go out, if I go into a different area, I'll take a phone and a Bluetooth speaker. And I know one thing that intrigues these creatures the most is the sound of children playing. And it's I don't know why, but almost every encounter I've had on my property, there's a school about 300-400 yards from the woods, and it's just a very small elementary school. But around 1 or 2 o'clock, when them children go out to play outside, is when I've gotten the most evidence It's like
Really?
they're drawn to these children playing. Have you ever thought or tried doing anything like that to maybe see if you can get any kind of response back, any wood knocks?
Um, I haven't really been out there hitting to, doing the knocks or anything, but I have heard it's make the scream out noise that kind of echoes down when you're on water. Things the sound
Hmm.
travels, long ways, and we've heard it out there scream out, um, especially during a full moon. but
Right.
but yeah, we could possibly try that in the future, do some knocking and see. But I did hear that that night we were filming, they did put up, well, we did hear the knocking, but we didn't really answer them back. I was just like, y'all hear that? And then when the stick comes sailing at us, I'm like, something doesn't want us out here.
Oh,
Because I've heard
absolutely.
this is a territorial creature. He
Hmm.
or it or they, they don't like, I don't think they like you in their territory. Because I've
Yeah.
a lot of different other eyewitnesses that had been out there and they were camping or going, and it would circle them, making all kinds of noises and scare them half to death to where they never wanted to go back again. Like it didn't want them there.
Absolutely. Depending on what this creature is, it could be a big type of Bigfoot. Sounds Bigfoot in nature, but Bigfoot, and the way I classify them, there's 5 types, and they're all territorial. They you get the bent over saplings. One thing that is really intriguing that a lot of people come across is when you get these saplings that are made in like an X. Have y'all ever ran across any of that, or any of the eyewitnesses ever ran across the X's in the woods
You mean with the sticks?
with
Yeah.
the sticks or trees?
Well, one of the a cryptozoologist, M.K. Davis,
Hmm.
he claimed that he came across stuff like that. I'm pretty sure it was him that was telling me that he came across those kind of structures in the woods. And he goes down there where my grandfather's camp was, and he's found footprints. He was the one in the beginning that was the skeptic when they did the track thing, and then
Right.
after he had his own encounter, found the tracks when he went to that area where no one knew he was coming. He just decided to go in there, and he found tracks. Then he started getting interested, and then he found other things like the structures, and then he told me he found dead hogs with their, that had been mangled and, left to rot, like my grandfather had claimed when he found the tracks out there, that, this thing was like must have came across these wild boar. Wild boar are pretty mean, and it
Absolutely.
tore these hogs. They had blood splattered all over the place. Their throats were ripped out, and so, you know,
Yeah, they were in the heartland of his territory, most
so he
definitely.
became a believer after he called and was like, "I'm sorry about that. I believe now," and so we become friends. He's, and I used to keep up with a lot of the sightings and encounter, things he's found out there since then.
Well, I'm glad he apologized because I seen he put out a series of videos, of course, doing different creatures, and one of them was on the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and the whole footprint attached to the shoe come up, and he's trying to debunk it, and I'm like, bro, this thing is real, man. It's absolutely real. It is, because the footprints your grandfather got, the ones that you've held up, they're not all the same as like that footprint. There's
Mhm.
different sizes, long toes, short toes, but they all have 3 toes.
Mhm.
And it's not just that footprint making those casts. It's, to me, there's different ones out there, more than one. And
Mhm.
the evidence just matches up with what your grandfather brought out to the public. It's just, I'm a believer. I'm definitely a believer. Steve Riley asked another question, and this is a big one among Bigfoot enthusiasts everywhere, especially researchers. Have you ever seen any other strange things like orbs or other creatures?
I've seen a UFO.
Oh, interesting. Do
For real.
tell. Do tell.
um, when I was young, we had another camp on the river up in Angie, which isn't far. It's, connected to the same swamp, the Boggy and all that. And
Mhm.
uh, our camp was probably about 200-300 yards from the river, and we were all sitting on our front porch. So it wasn't just me that saw it. It was my family, then another family. And this thing came over the river, and it was hovering. It didn't have any sound. And it was shining like blue lights down on the water. And then we watched it go up, and then it come over our camp, and then it shot straight up in the air and disappeared. And I could remember that like it was yesterday. And my dad had an encounter out there with like UFO type thing. He was him and his cousin Jeff, who dogs. His cousin Jeff, they were out there hunting, and they said this big gold object just kind of was hovering near them, and then they saw it and they thought, what, like they didn't know what the world it was. So they would move and it would kind of follow them. And they said they squatted down by a tree, and then they said time went by, and they all of a sudden it's dark. So I'm like, y'all might have got abducted,
Wow.
But he swears to that even now. I asked him about that not too long ago, and he's like, no, that really happened. And he said you could have asked, I remember our cousin Jeff talking about it too. He said, yeah, it was something out there. And I remember him telling my mom, he's like, if I don't come back. So
Wow.
but yeah, so there's stuff out there that could maybe this thing's like something that got left from another planet. I mean, we don't really know what else is out there in the universe.
Absolutely.
And this thing could have just be something like alien like.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask this before anybody gets the chance to put it in the chat. The $1 million question is, after your UFO sighting or even before, did you have any action going on with wood knocks, an encounter with the creature, howls, anything of the sort?
No, you mean when we saw the UFO thing? No, that was in a different swamp, and at that time, I guess we weren't really thinking about. I mean, it was the same. It was called the Boggy type, but it is kind of connected with Honey Island. But I was, young at that time. I just remember that UFO, and knowing that's what it was, and I really wasn't thinking about it being affiliated with the creature back then.
Right.
But now that I look back on it, it's possible.
Right. And there's a lot of encounters that I hear of where people do have they have either a Bigfoot encounter, and then right after they either see the orb or they see a UFO coming across, or vice versa. They see the UFO, then right after they have an encounter with the Bigfoot. So a lot of people think they could be beings from another dimension, another planet, and I've never had that type of experience. I've only had the flesh and blood. I'm 90 to 95% flesh and blood, but that 10 to 5%, there is something strange going on with these creatures. Scott Pace definitely has had some weird encounters happen to him. So that, from what I've seen and what he's told me, I'm definitely, there's something weird going on with these creatures. And that's why we get the questions of, if you have a UFO encounter, is that creature been seen? Have you heard, wood knocks, or heard it howl, or even seen it? So we get that a lot, especially talking to different types of people with different types of encounters. So that's definitely interesting that you've seen a UFO out in that part of the area. That sparked a lot of interest in the chat, I tell you. Rusty River said, footprint of the Honey Island swamp monster has 3 toes, and so does the Boggy Creek creature. Absolutely. Just to reiterate on that, There is a possibility when the Boggy Creek creature slipped away for 8 years, he may have ended up in Honey Island. Possibility, it's definitely out there, y'all. Definitely out there. Um, so in Honey Island, has there been any recent encounters to your knowledge of the
The
creature?
the more recent ones were a few years ago. There was one that someone told me they saw. It was actually an area called Indian Village, which is they have Indian mounds and stuff in that close to that area. But there's been two sightings in that area and that's still the Honey Island Swamp, but it's more where the swamp tours go. Take a lot of the tourists, so it's like it's getting where it comes out in civilization, like it's not worried. but
Right.
but someone saw it digging out of a dumpster out of a store at night, late at night, when they were on their way home. They saw this thing like it was digging out of a dumpster. And it's that store is not too far from that getting into the swamp right behind it. But then after Katrina, they had all these camps that were destroyed after the storm, so that a lot of the people that used to go out there didn't go anymore to their camp because it was either half sunk in the bayou or whatever. But the swamp tours were taking some people through there, and this man contacted me, and said he had taken his father on a swamp tour for his birthday, and he said the tour guide was talking to the group and telling them about. And they were all looking, over this way, and they kept hearing a smell. They kept smelling something, and the tour guide said, "Oh, that's just some dead animal floating around out here." And he said he happened to look over by those camps, and it was something that was squatting down by the camp, and it had its arm like this, like just sitting there looking off out at the river. And he got a good look at it. And he said he was so stunned that he didn't know, he didn't say anything. And the tour boat went around the bend, and he kept thinking, did I hallucinate? He's thinking, did I imagine it? But then the more he thought about it, he said, I know that it was, I saw something. And he said he finally, when he got in the car to take his dad back, he told his dad what he'd seen. And then he contacted me. He said, oh, you're the only one I would really tell this to, because, and he said what he described as the face. He said the face had looked like old leather skin, and the eyes were yellow looking, like they were sick, almost like it had some sickness, but maybe that was the amber, but he said this thing, he said it was scary and looking like if he said if he came across this in the swamp and he had a gun, he would shoot it, because that's how scared he said it would made him think, just the look of it. And I'm like, well, I hope you wouldn't shoot it, because but some people probably would. But I guess if it's coming at you, but I mean, if it's not hurting you, I wouldn't want anyone to shoot it. But
no, absolutely
but
not.
that was well, there was another. There's been like 13 different people I've talked to that had encounters after my grandfather that I filmed when I was making my documentary film in 2005, and and there's been those two after that, but and then just people finding tracks, and more recent, we found tracks out there more recently, over the last couple of years, but
yeah, that's definitely interesting. Has there been any sightings closer to the city or in the town?
just that one that was in the dumpster, that which was, people live around there, so
right. And I hear about that a lot, that these creatures are starting to migrate. Not that one in particular, but a lot of these Sasquatch type creatures, or even the dogman or werewolf, are being found more towards the suburbs and closer to the cities now.
Actually, there was another lady that did see, and she lives north towards Angie and Isabel, which isn't too far. but it's far enough. But they have a lot of pastures, horse pastures and cow
Hmm.
pastures around her. And she saw it cross the road, and she was coming home, and it crossed her path, and then it jumped. They had a fence that went to a wooded area, and it jumped over that fence. And she stopped her car, and she said she remembered seeing like it had long hair hanging from its arms when it would walk, and it looked back and it had the long hair. But she swears that that's what she thinks. She said it definitely was this creature. But and then maybe it was going after some chickens, or who knows
Right.
what. The farm had maybe some eggs, I don't know. But it's not, that area also connects to the swamp.
The
So
swamp. Yeah.
yeah, it's right, that borders it. So
Has there been a lot of sightings? I know with your grandfather, of course, that sighting looked like it was in the day. Um, has there been any other encounters with this creature during the day?
um well, there's been, yeah, they've had other eyewitnesses seen it during the day, and they've also had eyewitnesses that have seen it at nighttime.
Mhm.
So they had there was like 13 different people I talked with, and there was probably half in the day, half at night.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, most of the encounters I hear, a lot of them do happen at night. A lot of the encounters I've been have happened to me have been in the day. Um,
Mhm.
the few I've had at night, which has only really been about two. One I got bluff charged, but I don't think it was Sasquatch in nature. But
Mhm.
like I said, all of my encounters are happening during the day, and I know it has to do with that school. It's because you know these creatures are very curious. Talking with another friend of mine who all he does is research Sasquatch and helps people that have issues with Sasquatch. He gets lots of encounters where these things are looking in your window. He actually had one guy give him his story that he had a problem with a Bigfoot coming in after he shot at it. Uh, I guess, kind of in self defense. He shot at the ground and then, hightailed it home 15 miles. And he had an issue with these Bigfoot coming around
Mhm.
and stealing all his hand tools, rakes, shovels.
Really?
And yeah, and just they took them and then
Maybe they were going to use them.
yeah, oh yeah, no doubt. And then, they would come and terrorize his house for 2 days, and then that third day, all his hand tools are just thrown in that garage on the ground. So
Wow.
it's interesting all the stuff you hear and how curious these things are. I've heard of them, being caught in a window watching TV. If that's interesting, yeah, it's
Yeah.
so they're very very curious creatures. Like I said, I've heard of some encounters where they've actually been caught inside the Dallas metro area around buildings and dumpsters and stuff. So yeah, it's to say the least, they're becoming a lot bold. There's a lot of researchers trying to figure out what's going on with these creatures while they're becoming that bold. The dog man, same way. There's starting to be more prevalent in suburbs. Follow people home, open
Mhm.
doors. So yeah, definitely something going on.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't understand what that is. We got a few more minutes. I know you have a book out, and you do have a Facebook page on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. You want to give us some info about both of those and let
Well,
everyone know where they can go?
I have the honeyislandswampmonster.com website that lists my books. It has a link to my books and my documentary films. Uh, I have a Facebook page, the Honey Island Swamp Monster Facebook page. So you can find me there. Uh, I've written the Honey Island Swamp Monster documentations, which is like, you know, a book that's has all the eyewitness encounters and my grandfather's story. And then the film is sort of the book in documentary style. But back when I made that film years ago, I used my It was just a handheld old video camera, like
Mhm.
home video camera. It wasn't a big production. It was just me and the camera. Whenever I happened to come across an eyewitness, I'd ask them, will you tell your story on camera? And wherever we were, whether we were, going down the river and going to a houseboat party or whatever, and if someone I knew had an encounter, I'd get them to tell it to me on camera. So I made that little film. It wasn't, it's not a fancy film, but my next project, maybe it'll be a little bit better cameras. But and then I wrote two children's books. One is more like a chapter book that's based on the legend and my experience growing up as the granddaughter to the monster hunter.
Right.
And that one's The Mystery of Honey Island Swamp. And then I did a children's book for younger kids called The Very Hairy Scary Honey Island Swamp Monster. So all those books I can find on my website. And I do other books too, like cookbooks, like Swamp Cooking.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. Definitely.
Yeah.
I
just did one called
cookbooks.
Mardi Gras Cookbooks. So
yeah, I actually seen that on there, and I'm like, man, I may have to get that one. I love me some cookbooks, most definitely. Any other upcoming projects you got coming on before we let you get loose to your night?
Just that, I'll keep y'all posted if I do the private swamp tour, overnight investigation tour, like night vision type tour. And
Awesome.
then I'm, hopefully maybe do a revised, updated documentary with some new things. That's like actually go out there and spend the night out there myself with a group of people and see what happens.
Awesome. I know myself and Scott Pace will definitely be on that tour if you get it kicked off.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
All right, Mrs. Holyfield, it's almost 8:00. Any last words?
Well, it's nice to meet you, and
Likewise, absolutely.
thank
Like
you for
I
having
said,
me on the show.
yes, ma'am. You're welcome anytime. Like I said, this is one of my most wanted interviews. Like I said, I followed the Honey Island Swamp Monster since I was a kid, and it's just been an absolute pleasure having you on, talking with you, hearing everything your grandfather encountered and got. To say the least, it's remarkably awesome. And I can't wait till you get that tour kicked off, because my partner just said, "You bet I'm in." So, yeah, and he don't live far from there, so yeah, most definitely. But we'll let you get to your night. We're at 8:00. Have yourself a great night. Thank you for the interview. I really do appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, guys, what did y'all think about that? Yeah, Steve, she is a member. She joined today. So, yeah, she's definitely a member of the group. So, we can go a little longer if y'all want, or we can shut her on down. Throw it out in the chat. If y'all want to talk about something in particular, we can talk about some, or if Scott Pace wants to get on and bullcarn a little bit, we can do that too. I know he's probably itching to talk a little bit. We had quite a few in the chat tonight too. Of course, Steve Riley, Rusty Rivers, welcome. Welcome, my friend. We had Marquetta. We had, of course, Scott Pace. Of course, we had True Encounters with Marvin Allen in the house. What up, Marvin? We had quite a few people. Kawhi Snyder, Carl Martinez, Facebook user, don't know who that was. Can someone contact Dana for a tour of the area? If you go to her Facebook page, and it's here on the banner on the bottom, you can contact her through there, and I'm pretty sure she can, once she kicks off her swamp tour, she'll definitely take you out. All right, guys, anything else you want to talk about? If not, we're going to shut her on down. Put it in the chat if y'all want to talk about something. We got some free time. If not, maybe I can show y'all some pictures. If y'all want to see those, I can show y'all some of let's see. I can show y'all the picture of the dog man I caught a few months ago in September. And let me see. And I can show y'all through the different spectrums of light I put this thing through to kind of verify it. So here's the original. Of course, you see the big O circles right in there. And then the second one, the second spectrum I put it through was this here. And it kind of lightened it up a little bit. But definitely see something's there in both circles. This what I suspect to be a juvie dog man. This quite possibly could be a dog man. The only thing that throws me off is the rounded mouth. It doesn't have a very long snout, but damn thing sure looks evil. And then here's another spectrum. A little too much. Right in here, same thing. Definitely something there. And then I do believe I have a thermal spectrum of it right here. So all this was ran through my Adobe software. You know, this is what I do to verify evidence, whether it's mine or somebody else's. But I try to put it through the ringer and not just post any blob squatch or anything that I think could be a Bigfoot or dog man, because of course, you know, a lot of people post blurry pics. I try to stay away from that, not to discredit their pics, not to say they're not actually getting evidence, but I want to provide the most clear and attainable evidence I can to actually prove that these things exist. So that's just the way I do it. I think I got a couple more I can show y'all. Probably stuff y'all hadn't seen. Here's a picture of a Bigfoot that I actually got crouching down, hiding. Actually see the nose right here, eye on the other side. There's the head. And what looks to be right over here, shoulder and possibly an arm coming down. This is one I haven't really showed. So y'all are pretty much the first ones to see it, but that was off a video that I got on my property. So it was definitely there. Then I got some other ones, but I'd have to dig them up, and I don't want to bore y'all with all that. But we'll go back to the chat, and if no one else has got anything, we're going to go ahead and shut her on down. And it doesn't look like anyone's in the chat saying they want to talk about anything, so we're going to go ahead and shut her on down. I appreciate everybody showing up for this interview. Definitely a great one. We'll have to get her back. In the upcoming weeks, I'm going to try and reach out to Scott Carpenter. I've interviewed him once on B Moss's channel with B. I'm going to try and get him on my channel and talk about some weird stuff. we'll definitely try and get Scott Carpenter on, and he'll blow your mind, definitely. And with that, everybody, y'all have a good night. We will catch y'all on the rebound on the next show. Look out for that in the next week or two. And I will see y'all later.